On today's program, we travel to the Cimarron Valley Research Station to visit with senior agriculturalist Becky Carroll about harvesting and storing pecans. Kim looks at several Pyracantha cultivars that add beauty and are great sources of food for wildlife. There's Radicchio in the vegetable garden. Extension entomologist Jackie Lee helps identify a couple of pecan pests and how to keep their numbers down with a little cleanup. And Kim is in the kitchen to look at seeds and sprouts. Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance is provided by TLC, Oklahoma's leading garden center, Southwood Landscape and Nursery, Tulsa's source for great gardens, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
It is harvest time at the Cimarron Research Station. Joining us is Becky Carroll, Extension Assistant in Fruit and Nut Crops. We could hear a lot of activity here at the research station.
We have some propane cannons going off, and then there's a bird guard. It's kind of a scare sound to keep the crows and other critters away. So,
because this is the time of year when the shucks are opening, a lot of the birds will come in and try to steal our harvest.
Right, and one crow or one squirrel, they can take about a pound of nuts per day. Mm-hmm. So if you consider the expense of a pound of pecans, that's pretty expensive if you let them get too much. And they can take your entire crop if you're not careful. So the sooner we can get them off the tree and into our building, into our house, the better off we have having a good crop that year.
So I want to look at what homeowners need to do to harvest their crop. And I think the first step is, when do we need to start harvesting?
Right. Pecans ripen, they start in October. And depending on the varieties, it can be into November or even into December whenever they ripen. So you need to pick a variety that's going to be suitable for your area. Mm-hmm. So if it's still closed and we get a hard freeze, they may not open.
Okay.
So we want to make sure that we have an early ripening fruit in the northern parts of the state. Mm-hmm. The southern areas can be a little bit later, but we want to have something that's going to open early so they don't get frozen in the shuck. But anytime these sutures on the shuck start to split, that means the pecan is ripe and ready to be harvested. So whenever you first see these little sutures starting to split open, you can get out there and start getting them out of the tree and harvesting, because they'll just pull right out of there. You can see where that little tissue has been holding the nut in place, and now it's no longer getting anything from that tree anymore. So it's ripe and ready to be harvested.
And so obviously we can wait for them to fall to the ground, but that gives a lot of opportunity for other critters to gather them.
A lot of people have to depend on the wind to knock them out of the trees, and in Oklahoma that's not a problem a lot of the time. But the sooner we can get them inside, the better chance we have having a good crop, because the crows, blue jays, squirrels, turkeys, deer, everything else likes pecans too. So
and so you have a really simple tool to whack those seeds down, and I'm going to step back and let you demonstrate.
This is a frailing pole, and you can see up in the tree we have most of these shucks are open, so I'm going to get in here and just try to knock them down. And we've put a tarp on the ground to see if we can get them to land where we want them to. It's not going to happen for all of them, but if we can get some of them out on the tarp, that would be helpful.
Well, Becky, you've dropped quite a few pecans down here, and I could see some of them are still in their husks. And my guess, this one's not really opened. Is there a problem with this?
This one may have some type of insect damage or other damage. It may just be not a quality pecan. And there's a few other ones that I found. I think this one had early insect damage and it's not going to open. But a lot of the time, any type of disease or insect damage on the shuck is going to prevent them from opening at the proper time. So if you have something like this, you can try to open them. Like this one was, you can just pull them out if they're loose. But like this one, it's tight and it's not going to open, so it's probably not good.
We'll just discard those.
And the thing about pecans, all of this liquid in the shuck, the more you touch it, the more it stains your fingers.
Okay.
So you can tell pecan people because they have brown fingers at this time of year.
And that's just full of moisture, and that's the
Right.
reason we don't want to leave this in here to
Right.
dry. We want to go ahead and pull those out of there.
Yeah, we want to exclude any of these. They're called stick tights.
Okay.
And we want to take them out of our bucket as we're picking up, because they'll just be moisture to add to mold possibilities later.
Okay. So speaking of picking up, we dropped a large amount onto the tarp to make it easy to pick those up, but you have tools also. There's a variety of different tools for collecting pecans if they just fall in the yard, right?
Yep, we've got this little picker-upper. I'm not sure what its name is, but it just has the wire bottom, and you go along and just pick up individual nuts. A lot easier on the tarp. They're right there available, but it works in the grass too. You can see it works over here just fine. And then whenever you get your little basket full, you just empty it into a 5-gallon bucket or whatever you're using and keep going.
Okay.
And that saves your knees, and you're not having to be bending or on your hands
Right.
and knees picking up nuts all afternoon.
And there's several different types of these small rollers. There's a couple that look like a slinky on a stick.
And you just roll them along. It looks kind of like a toy. Maybe you can get some kids to help you out with that if they think it looks fun. So
And
we've
you have
got
a bigger one.
a bigger version. This is it's called a bag-o-nut, and so it rolls along. It has little fingers, and it acts kind of like the commercial type of harvester, but it uses those little fingers to pick them up and then empty them into the basket. And then whenever you get ready to, you could maybe go to your tarp or somewhere, and then it just dumps out and empties, and then you can pick them up in one area.
And before you use something like this, you can actually use a leaf blower and clear the leaves out of the way
Right.
so we don't get as much debris as we just
Or
said.
you could use just a regular rake and rake them together, and then that way you don't have to go quite as, around as much. You'll just be in one localized area.
All right, once we've picked up all our nuts, we need to dry them so that we can store them later. So for drying, we need really good air circulation.
Right. At this point, when they come off the tree, they have a really high moisture content. Especially if we're knocking them out of the tree, they may have 15 or 20% moisture, so they can be kind of rubbery. And we want to dry them down to about 4 or 5% moisture. And the good way to know when you're at that level is you take a kernel and you just break it in half, and it snaps. And so you can actually hear the snap of the kernel. And so that tells you that it's at a good moisture level. This one needs just a little bit more drying and it'll be good. Some of these others that were taken out of the shuck, they're quite a bit wetter, and they just feel kind of rubbery at this point.
Okay.
So,
and we want to make sure that we get those dried. Is that about a 1 to 2 week process?
it depends on your moisture of the air outside. If it's raining or high humidity, it may take a little bit longer, but usually a week if you had a fan on them or hanging up somewhere, that's going to dry them out pretty well.
And once they're dry, we could store them in the freezer.
Yeah, you can get them cracked or you can store them in shell, either way. If you left them out at room temperature, they'll only be good for about maybe 3 to 6 months. In shell, they'll last a little bit longer, maybe 6 months. If they're shelled already, it may be 3 months, and they'll start to go rancid because of the high oil content. But if we store them in the refrigerator, they'll last a little bit longer. But if we store them in the deep freeze, they'll last for maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So
excellent.
Yeah.
All right.
So.
Well, thank you so much for showing us.
You're welcome.
Fall color and wildlife value, Pyracantha is one of the best shrubs we can find. Its berries arrive just in time for fall decorating, and they hang on through the winter months to feed the birds. The dense branches also create perfect habitat for wildlife. Many gardeners are turned off, however, by the large size and the thorny branches. But with its exceptional heat tolerance and year-long interest, Pyracantha is a shrub that shouldn't be overlooked in the landscape. Luckily, there are several new cultivars on the market that tackle some of the problems gardeners experience with the straight species. Let's start by taking a look at the smallest of these cultivars, Red Elf. This compact variety reaches a mature size of just 2 to 3 feet tall and wide and can be kept even denser with careful pruning. Yet it contains all the beautiful year-long interest of its larger cousins, including evergreen foliage, berries in the fall and into the winter, and also fragrant spring blossoms. With this small size, it's very useful for use in containers, or you can use it as a very low border or hedge to create separation in the landscape. The Pyracantha share many of the same diseases as apple trees. This variety, Red Elf, was bred to have disease resistance. Another compact variety is Silver Lining, reaching a mature size of 3 to 4 feet. And this variety is desirable for its unique foliage among the Pyracantha with its variegation, and it has year-long color. In the summer months, we have this silver and white variegation. As the cooler autumn nights set in, we'll turn to a pink and coppery color and maintain that throughout the season. It doesn't berry as much as the other plants, but it also has fewer thorns, making it a much more manageable plant for the landscape. Great to use for a pop of bright color that won't burn out in the summer heat. For a larger size shrub, we have Yukon Bell Pyracantha. It'll reach a mature size of about 6 feet wide and with some of the arching branches up to about 8 feet tall. So this is a great option for a mixed border. It's also a good variety to use for espalier. We've seen a lot of Pyracantha used that way, trained against a house, providing a really beautiful pop of color in the late part of the year. This shrub again is very good for wildlife because of its density and the flavorful fruits that attract birds. The fruits are also wonderful for decorating. We could cut branches to bring inside for fall and winter decorating, and they'll hold their color well into the winter months. Now, all of the Pyracanthas are very tough plants for the landscape. They're excellent for xeriscaping, and they're also good for firewise landscapes. I enjoy experimenting with specialty crops in the garden, especially when those crops cost a lot at the grocery store. So this year we've been growing Radicchio. This is a in the chicory genus, a plant group that includes endive, escarole, and even the chicory that's used as a coffee substitute. But Radicchio is widely used in Europe, especially Italy, where it's eaten raw or grilled or roasted. The beautiful heads, they'll turn red as they mature. They look great in salads or pastas. Now, to produce these, we grow nice fall crops starting September 1st. We seeded these and grew them beneath a row cover to keep grasshoppers and other late summer pests out, which worked very well. And we have it in a little intercropping system. The Radicchio takes anywhere from 65 to maybe 85 days to mature. It really depends on what variety you're growing, but there's a few cues you can look for that tell you the head's ready to harvest. Now, if you compare this plant to the one over here, you can see we're starting to take on more red coloration. As the plant matures, the head is going to turn red with white veining, so they'll lose the green. If we harvest it in the green state, it's going to be exceptionally bitter. The plant already has a bit of a bitter flavor as it is, very distinct flavor. So we want to look for the head to get round, also more firm. Right now it's still very loose. It's going to firm up and take on that red coloration. And then we can harvest it by coming down below and cutting underneath the head the same way we would head lettuce or cabbage. Now, interestingly, depending on what our winter does, we might be able to get a second crop out of this plant. So what we would want to do is leave the remaining plant in place, give it a bit of protection over the winter, and if we have a mild winter, with good luck, we will get a second head produced on this plant in the springtime. Certainly not a harm leaving the plant there and just giving it a try. Radicchio is a unique crop with a very distinctive flavor. It pairs well with either sweet or salty foods to cut that bite. Look for it at your local farmer's market or grocery store and try something new on the dinner table. As we continue our discussion on backyard pecan production, we welcome back Dr. Jackie Lee, Extension entomologist. And today we're going to talk about sanitation, which is a really important part of an IPM program for pecans or any plant material in the backyard, and easy to apply as well.
It really is. It's one of the simplest methods of insect control. It's cheap, and then also it's very environmentally friendly.
So when it comes to sanitation, what are the major pests that we're dealing with?
Well, there's mainly two different types of pests that we deal with. The hickory shuckworm, which is a moth that lays its eggs on the pecan shuck. So when that egg hatches, the larvae bores into the shuck, feeds within that shuck, and the pecan will fall to the ground.
And you have an example for us to look at?
I sure do.
All right, and so these are, aborted, basically, pecans that fell down, right?
Right, and a lot of times when you see these pecans, they'll have a black staining on the shuck, and if you open them up, you would find this black, what we call insect frass. And then sometimes you can also find the larvae, in which we found one right there.
All right. So by collecting these and destroying them, we're preventing the larvae from
overwintering. That's right. They like to pupate in these old shucks that just collect on the ground. So if we get rid of these old shucks, we actually decrease the numbers for the next year.
And they have a few generations throughout the year. So
yeah, 3 to 4 in Oklahoma.
So whenever we see those pecans drop, probably midsummer, we want to start collecting those because that's going to be producing the next generation.
Yes, Kim, yes.
Okay. Now, something many of us are familiar with are the twig girdlers, and from an ornamental standpoint, I always tell homeowners it's not a big deal. They're not going to kill the tree, but if you're trying to produce a crop, we might have a different attitude towards them, right?
Right, right. Twig girdlers are really interesting because they lay their eggs right beneath the bark. So right now there's a little larvae in here that'll feed on this dead wood. Now these limbs will fall to the ground and the larva will overwinter in this twig. So if we get rid of these twigs that are falling on the ground or prune them out of the trees, then we'll decrease our population in the pest problem.
And you can really tell a twig that's been fed, that has a twig girdler. I mean, there's an obvious chew mark there that it's been eaten around versus something that's just snapped. So
Right.
it's real easy to tell the difference between something that's infested and just storm damage, for example.
Right.
Are there any other insect pests that we need to think about?
Really, twig girdler and hickory shuckworm are the two pecan pests that you can really control with sanitation methods. The other ones, you really need to use some other control tactics.
Okay. And then, of course, just like any plant, if there's diseased foliage that falls to the ground, we want to collect that and get rid of that as well.
That's right. That's right. If you get rid of the diseased foliage and twigs, you can really cut down on your disease issues in the following growing season.
All right. Well, thank you so much. A great way to produce fresh and nutritious food throughout the winter months is to grow sprouts. Sprouts are essentially immature plants that are harvested just after germination. Now, it's important to eat all your sprouts fully cooked to avoid any potential foodborne illnesses. Sprouts are packed with protein and vitamins. Sprouts can be grown from many different types of seed. The one we're most familiar with is the mung bean. These produce what we commonly call bean sprouts that are used in Asian cuisine. In addition to mung beans, many different seeds and beans can be sprouted. We have a mixture of beans and peas in here, including chickpeas, just regular garden peas, lentils, and adzuki. This is what they looked like before they were sprouted. Sprouted beans provide rich source of protein and vitamins. They're wonderful in casseroles, stir fries, or soups. Another sprout that we're very familiar with are the alfalfa sprouts, commonly used on sandwiches and in salads, and we also see other greens, leafy greens that are used for sprouting. The problem with this is the USDA as well as OSU does not recommend consumption of raw sprouts the way that these are commonly used. You can grow these sprouts and use them in cooked dishes, and that will reduce any risk of foodborne illness. Another great leafy green for sprouting are the brassicas. You'll see broccoli, cabbage, kale, and mustards grown for sprouts. And these add a lot of flavor to your dishes. Again, you could cook them in a stir fry, a casserole, just about anything to add a very rich source of nutrients and a punch of flavor. Now, in addition to the greens, we can also sprout grains, and that might be a little less familiar to us. Here we have a hard red winter wheat that's been sprouted, as well as a mixture of many different grains. And you can see the little white roots are very fibrous. They look a little bit like mildew, and that might cause some concern. But if you look closely, you can see that those are just the fibers on the roots. If you did see mildew, it would be in a mat altogether, and you would want to discard your sprouts. Now, grains, a lot of people find sprouted grains are easier to digest than unsprouted grains. And so using these when you make breads, casseroles, even in a cooked cereal is a great way to provide a very rich source of nutrition, but in a form that's a bit easier to digest. The same is true for any type of seed or nut. You can sprout pumpkin seeds, peanuts, almonds, sunflowers, and again, those are going to be a little bit easier to digest. Of course, the sprouted versions provide all the nutrition that their unsprouted counterparts would provide in your diet. Another fun thing is to look for mixes or create your own mix of sprouts. This one has grains as well as legumes, and added later you would put a little mustard for punch. So this creates a wide mix of flavors and textures as well as nutrients for any dish. Sprouting is an easy way to produce locally grown food right from your countertop in the kitchen. Remember to fully cook all of your sprouts before consuming them.
Next week, certified arborist Brian Eshelman will show us how to properly remove a tree from the landscape, including the equipment and techniques that we need to do it safely. Kim will sprout some tasty sprouts, and we'll visit Hoffman Pecan Farm to see how pecans are processed. Join us then for more TV you'll grow to love. For additional information, show notes, plant lists, recipes, and fact sheets, visit our website or contact your local Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service office. Segments from this episode, along with hundreds more from previous episodes, are available on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Oklahoma Gardening. Be sure to join our Facebook group for information on upcoming episodes and gardening events, photos, and discussions of gardening topics. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens. This outdoor television studio is made possible with the help of our generous underwriters, TLC Garden Centers, Southwood Landscape and Nursery, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society.